Hey there, welcome to Birch Trees by Coach T with teacher commentary. What I'm going to do here is go through the entire lesson. It's a video, and I want to share with you the explicit instructional procedures and techniques, the sort of script I go over, and the analogies I use that have made this lesson so successful. Day one of this project is all about masking the trees. We talk about proportion, we talk about creating distance and space on a 2D surface, and we talk about how to use masking tape. Now, when I give the demonstration, the first thing I do, as you see here in the video, is I write my name and the class code. So that's the grade and the first letter of the teacher's last name, if I said that correctly. Yeah. What I won't do is I will not let them get tape if I haven't passed it out already. I won't let them move on to the next step until every person at the table has written their name and class code and their horizon line, which is the next step. Now, what we're going to do for the horizon line, I like to have my students hold the pencil sideways, and I have a very odd grip, you can see it here, but what I have them do is I tell them hold the top of the pencil, like at the eraser, and then just gently drag their pencil across the page. What this does, it gives the line a much more organic feel, and it prevents them from hulking out and essentially ripping a hole through the page with their dark pencil line. This will help later on when we remove the masking tape, because that line is going to be going through those birch trees, and when we erase them, we want them to be erasable. And more often than not, these kiddos draw as hard as they possibly can. So tip there, hold the pencil at the eraser, sideways, move it along. That's all for the horizon line. Next, we talk about proportion and what that means and how we can use that on a flat surface to create the illusion of space. They love illusions. So we look at a real picture of birch trees. You can find one on Google. And I ask, are those trees over there in the background? Are they really tiny trees? And they go, no, they just are farther away. I go, aha. So we can use something like size to create the illusion of space by changing what's smaller or what's bigger as we do it. So then we introduce the masking tape. Now, I also mentioned that today's task is not only to get the trees on the page, but to tame the tape. A lot of kids have trouble rolling the tape off and getting it so it doesn't roll up onto itself, which can be annoying. So as you see here in the video, what I do is I say, scoot your paper to the side. We always start from largest to smallest trees. 3 pieces of tape for large. In the foreground, great opportunity to mention foreground, middle ground, background. 2 pieces of tape for the middle ground, and of course 1 for the background. When I pause, they fill it in for me. Call and response. It's helpful. Anyways, scoot the paper to one side of your working area, and you're going to anchor the tape. What I say is, like, do we know what an anchor of a boat is? It prevents the boat from moving around and floating away. Same thing here. Anchor your tape above the paper, because we're starting with the largest one in the foreground. Anchor it above and below the page, and then either have them rip or cut. I give both options. I encourage the rip by telling them, it'll help build your little finger strength. Anything I can do to increase fine motor skills, super important. Now, once they have the 3, 2, or 1 piece of tape ready for their tree, it's time to pre-stick. In this video, I'm using a towel. I don't do that in my classroom. We just do it on our bodies, like on our shirts, our pants. I do a little marching motion. They think it's hilarious. And we do that to get some of the stickiness off the tape, so when we remove it later, it doesn't rip the paper up with it. After you put down a layer, each one, you want to smooth out the air bubbles and then fold it not over the edge, but over itself on the edge. All trees are going to extend off the top edge of the page, but either way, with the tree in the foreground, it's going to do both. So what you want to do is fold the tape over itself, not over the paper's edge, to create a tab. Again, this is for ease later when you take it off the page. I encourage my students to experiment with, is your tree completely vertical? Is it slightly diagonal? Are they overlapping? Get creative with it. Sometimes you'll have a friend tape the entire thing across, so it's important to mention you want to leave space for the beautiful sky to shine through. And that, my friends, is day 1 of this project. Day 2 of this project is all about the wet on wet watercolor technique, or the wow technique. Now, before I get into any of the logistics there, I tell them they've got to have a plan first, a color plan, because watercolors like to work from lightest to darkest. So, are you going to choose primary colors, warm colors, cool colors, analogous colors? I show them what analogous means next to each other on the color wheel. We have a big color wheel on the board. It's helpful to show them different examples of families they can use. Either way, have a plan and name the lightest color. And I have them close their eyes for a minute, name their lightest color. Then we get into the actual wet on wet technique. I use this because it shows them how to blend a really smooth, seamless, like ethereal sky. Now, I do this in 3 steps. Puddle the page, sideways scoop or sideways spin, and tap, tap, tap. That's what it is. So first we puddle the page in little scoops. I tell them, imagine they're just like splashing water on the page, and they start from the horizon line up or from one side to the other. I do not have them wet the entire page, because by the time they're done wetting it, where they started has dried, and that dampness and the friction of the brush just compromises the structural integrity of the paper. Also, advise them you're not rubbing the water around. There's no real rubbing in this technique as I explain it, because kids like to go across the page like this, whether or not they're adding water or paint. So I say you're going in small motions, like you're scrambling some eggs. You're just whoop, 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 putting that water down quick, quick, quick. So it's sitting on top. You don't want to rub it in yet. So that's puddle the page. Then I do the sideways spin for gathering paint. I tell them to do that because otherwise you'll get the vertical brush straight down into the pan and it can splash it. It can ruin the bristles. So that's just my technique. Do what works for you. And then they take that pigment that's on their brush, a very hydrated brush, and we tap, tap, tap it into the water and watch how it disperses. It's a nice way to say disperse. They get to know that vocabulary word. They say, what does disperse mean? I go, it means to spread out. So they all go, whoa, when it happens. It's lovely. Now, once you finish adding color to that puddled part of the page, a lot of alliteration there, puddle the rest of the page, whoosh, add the rest of your color. Then you're pretty much done with the sky. After the sky, this is where it gets important. Make sure you have that paper towel handy to manage pools. Water's going to pool on the edges and towards the center of the page. You can also use the paper towel not only to gather up those pools, but also to kind of add a cloud-like texture to sort of erase some paint areas if you so choose. Now, when you're done with the whole sky and the wet on wet, take the paper towel and I have them tap the horizon line. I didn't need to do that here in this video, but a lot of them have giant pools right at the horizon line. And before they add the tempera paint to the bottom, I like to get rid of that pool. So they get rid of the pool and they dry their brush on the paper towel. Next, we dip it into the white paint and I say small fish-like strokes, like Dory swimming real fast, all across the bottom. I tell them to go right over the tape. Some kids will try to avoid it, and I'm like, nah. It's there to protect the page underneath. Go right over it. So we add the layer of white, followed by a layer of the icy blue, and that's just a little bit of turquoise and white mixed together. And that, my friends, is day 2 of Birch Trees. Day 3 of Birch Trees could be your final day where you practice the birch bark technique and then do it on the final. Or you could take one full day to practice. I personally like doing this. I did it for the first time this year and it had an incredible effect. The kids felt so confident the next week. And this is where I introduced my social emotional learning aspect of this project, where we talk about identifying our emotions, being self-aware, and how to regulate that negative feeling that might come when you're trying something new. So it gets really intense, but the conversation starts with disappointment. We say, who has ever felt disappointed? It doesn't feel good. And I use the analogy like, have you ever fallen down the stairs. Like when you walk up and down the stairs, you don't expect to fall down. It's like, ooh, I didn't even realize that was a possibility. But like disappointment's a possibility all the time. You can't avoid it. It's gonna happen to you. But you can have strategies to help you manage it. And you can also reinforce with these kids that discomfort is temporary. When you fall down the stairs, your bum might hurt for a little while, maybe 10 minutes or so, but the pain, the discomfort, it fades. It's temporary. But you might fall down the stairs and break your ankle. That discomfort might last months. Months are still going to pass. Discomfort and pain are temporary, but you have to have support. You have to have strategies that are going to help you, quote, heal. So in the art room, what are some strategies we can use when we're feeling nervous, scared, anxious, excited? What can we do? And we talk about strategies to self-regulate. Some of those include belly breathing. They say deep breaths, self-affirmations with our mantra, peer affirmation, rooting for each other. You've got this. Some friends like to go get a drink of water and reset their bodies. That's a big one I use a lot. I'm like, when your body's feeling crazy, go give it some water, reset, and just the action of getting up, changing environment, and coming back to their work can really help to recenter the body. After your discussion about disappointment, which is a weird one to have, go into the demonstration about birch bark. One mistake that I have made is cutting the cardboard too big. So make sure you're using 2x2 inch pieces to fit their little hands. That can be a huge helpful factor when they go to try it. And you want to be very explicit. Give them something that they can relate to. This is not a swiping action. They're not looking through the phone they're not looking through like photos on their iPad, right? They want to press and create some pressure, like pushing the cardboard to the paper and then flicking it. I actually do this with my arm and I show them how. I'm like, it looks like this, and they go, ah! I go, it doesn't hurt. It's just a noise. But I want them to know, like, wiping is one sound, flicking is another. So having those cues that they can look for while they work can be super helpful. Now, on practice days, I print out 4 templates that are attached with the lesson plan, and they can use those to practice as much as they want for the entire class. A lot of them will want to keep these. So make sure you instruct them to write their names on those because they all look identical. Anyways, you spend an entire class or half a class if you have time practicing over and over and over again and prepping your students for the possibility of disappointment when the final comes around. Now, before that, in between these classes, I have removed all of the tape. If you want to remove the tape or you want to have your kids remove the tape, here's the big tip. Make sure when you pull the tape, you're pulling along, like parallel to the page. You don't want to pull the tape upwards. So if your paper is flat, you don't want to pull up. You want to pull along the surface of the page. Again, it will prevent ripping. And also keep your hands close to where you're pulling from. Like anchor the page with one and keep your hand close to the edge of the tape with the other. That will prevent a lot of headache down the line. The final day of the project is adding the birch bark to the final painting. Now, the texture of the practice sheets and the final paper that I use is very different. The practice are done on like regular Xerox copy paper, and the final is 140-pound textured, so it's toothy watercolor paper. So I have my students feel it, and I'm like, you've got to be aware of this difference. Just let them know it's coming. And then my analogy of the day when the class starts is I say, I am an Olympic gymnast. I am a 10-time national champion. I've won all the things. I haven't fallen off the balance beam in 5 months, and it's my turn. And I do a little flip. I like walk on I pretend and all the thing. They love it. And I say, now this routine might go perfectly, but it's also a possibility that I might, and I let them say, fall. And I went, right, I could fall off. And I say, if I fall off the balance beam, does it change the fact that I am a 10-time national champion? And they go, no. And I go, right. Does it change the fact that I am an elite world-class athlete at the Olympics? And they go, no. And I went, no, it does not. And then I relate it back to the birch trees. Friends, if you smudge your birch bark all over your painting? Does it change the fact that you now know how proportion and size can create distance and space in your artwork? No. Does it change the fact that you now know the wet on wet watercolor technique can create the most smooth and beautiful sky you've ever seen? And they go, of course not. They get so into it. I love it. And finally, I was like, I've seen you all practice this. Each and every one of you is ready. I know it. I've seen it. But it doesn't matter what I know and what I see. It matters what you believe and if you are ready. And even if you do it right, and even if you've done it right, it's still a possibility that it might not go right when it counts. And we need to be willing to accept that disappointment and know that it does not change our progress, and it does not change the fact that we have built art muscles throughout this entire project. These kids are motivated at this point in the lesson, and the energy is incredible. So what I have them do on that final day, because the final birch bark takes about 30 seconds, is practice first again, and then they go to the final. Remind them to go so slow, and at the end of class, meet on the rug and have several students identify how they felt in the beginning and how they feel now. I actually have them identify how they feel on the rug before they go back to their seats. So they'll be like terrified, excited, nervous, scared, worried, whatever it may be. Some kids are like, I'm happy. Like they're all the feelings. And once they can identify how they felt at the beginning, I'll be like, hey, how'd you feel, my little friend? Oh, I felt terrified in the beginning. And I went, okay. How do you feel now? She went, proud and confident. And I go, tell me how you got there. So like, I want them to see the process of self-awareness to self-management and just like accepting your feelings as they are and the fact that they're temporary. And they'll do this whole explanation. Well, I said the mantra in my head, and then I did some deep belly breathing. And then Ryan told me that I was amazing, and that really made me feel good. So the way they support each other, it's such an awesome team building activity too. And like, this is just a birch tree painting. It is so much more than a birch tree painting. It's an excellent opportunity for social emotional learning, and the results, the pride these kids have, they're so excited. And now for the next challenge that I give, no matter what it is, we've built this foundation of trust experimentation. We understand that disappointment is inevitable, which means it's going to happen. There's no avoiding it. So we've got to learn how to face it and build those skills when we feel in doubt. And what better way to do that than in the art room?